so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Your key to financial opportunity.
Chapter 6, Ar-La-Tex. It had been 12 days since Daniel Rometta had jumped bail bond from Traverse City, Michigan, when he, his girlfriend Lisa Dunn, and Mark Walter drove Mark's blue two-door Oldsmobile Cutlass ragtop across the state line and into Georgia, and then Alabama. His small gang of 3 fleeing the mounting death toll they had thus far left in the wake of their cross-country thrill ride. An affidavit written by hand on lined notebook paper and submitted to the court on August 12, 1986 by Johnny Williamson of Florida State Prison, Starkey, Florida. I had the occasion to meet 4 individuals calling themselves Dan, Lisa, Mark, and Tom at a gay bar named Honey for the Bear in downtown Montgomery, Alabama. Without going into detail concerning this meeting, I shared a brief conversation with the 3 above named young men concerning various things and the tavern. While we drank beer, the older fellow Dan and I was engaged in conversation about the desire to purchase an ounce of marijuana, which I did sell to this fellow for cash money. The transaction was strictly between me and this fellow Dan outside of the bar, back of the place in the parking area where my pickup truck was parked. After Dan bought the reefer, he placed it in an older model blue Oldsmobile. We went back into the bar at that time, where he became engaged in conversation with the young lady he called Lisa, who appeared to be his girlfriend. About that time, this younger fellow named Mark tried to engage me in conversation about a pistol he had on his person, which was a .22 caliber automatic. And when I asked this fellow Mark what he had the gun for, he remarked for robbery and killing purposes, but he was trying to get a heavier caliber weapon, because he would have to shoot someone at least 10 times to kill them with a .22 caliber pistol. And I got to kind of teasing this boy Mark, and also his buddy Tom, who appeared to be a little goofy. And at that time, this Dan asked me if I'd like to see a nice .357 Magnum pistol. I said I was about ready to go and leave the bar at that time. So we all walked together from the tavern and back into the parking lot. Dan, who was parked about 3 cars from my truck, went to his car and came back with the above-mentioned pistol. The gun interested me because it had been the shortest barrel on a .357 I had ever seen. And I asked him if he would be interested in selling me the weapon, which he wasn't at the time, and we was all kind of just standing around the back of the truck. And this fellow Mark asked me if I knew of anything good around Alabama for robbery. I told him all night, because I didn't really know them and trust them, that I didn't know of anything. So we parted company on that point. As I got into my truck, I noticed that the 2 younger fellows, this Tom and Mark, got in a brand new Pontiac, brown in color, if I remembered right, and pulled out first. And this Dan and Lisa got into a blue Oldsmobile and left also. And I remember thinking, more or less, wondering why the younger dudes were driving the brand new car. I don't know where or what these fellows did after this, because I went back to Birmingham, Alabama the following day, so I didn't see them anymore. I swear by my signature that the foregoing is a true and accurate account. Respectfully submitted, Johnny Williamson, inmate number 096448. This affidavit had left many unanswered questions. For one, had they in fact been a gang of 4 all along? And secondly, who the hell is Tom Cantrell? Well, Mr. Clifford Tom Cantrell was 26 years of age, of Traverse City, Michigan, 5 foot 9 inches, 180 pounds, brown hair and brown mustache. and Danny had told investigators that sure, he knew a subject by the name of Tom Cantrell, who owned a brown, older model Pontiac, and that in fact, he knew him so well that the four of them, Tom, Mark, Lisa, and himself, all drove to Florida together. And when they ran out of money, they even sold Tom's brown car that they had been driving to a drunk dealer in Plant City. And that at about that time, Tom, who had been talking about going to Arizona or Texas, left them on a bus to go see a girlfriend. But soon after, Danny recanted that version of events and suggested that Mark Walter had actually thrown Tom Cantrell into a crocodile pond 3 miles from Plant City, Florida. But then he changed his story again, stating that he and Mark had actually been with another white male at the time, around 20 years of age with blonde hair, and that man had been the one that actually put Cantrell in the pond, and that he and Mark had gotten into a fight with some hitchhiker by the name of Lee, and that they killed him and threw him into the same crocodile pond. But Lisa told investigators that she didn't know anybody named Lee, but that she did recall Danny talking about getting into a fight with somebody and dumping them in a gator pond. And now that she had thought about it, she could remember Danny saying something about him throwing Tom Cantrell into a gator pond as well. And though Danny later stated that his early admissions referencing allegedly killing 2 subjects and dumping their bodies off the bluffs around Alberta, Michigan, that was all bullshit. That he didn't kill those 2 guys and throw them off a cliff, and that he only claimed to have done so because he didn't like the Michigan authorities and thought he would, quote, fuck with them. But that his confession to dumping the hitchhiker in a gator pond in Florida, along with Cantrell's body, was in fact absolutely true. The only problem with this statement is that the actual Clifford Tom Cantrell had been apprehended in Livingston, Tennessee on or about February 21st, 1985, where he had been wanted on robbery charges. Tom stated during an interrogation that he had left Michigan on a bus on or about January 26th. He also stated that though he knows Danny Remetta, he had never been in Florida with Danny nor his gang. Investigators were able to affirm Tom's statements with the possession of gained information that while Cantrell was in the company of Remetta and Don at a certain time, there was no plausible indication that Cantrell was ever in Florida with Danny, Lisa, nor Mark, and the Tennessee authorities assuring Florida investigators at the time that they had offered a polygraph to Cantrell to be conducted either that week or the next, and to stay tuned. Interior Courtroom. Mr. Springstead. Officer Blancha, I would like to direct your attention to the matter you spoke to my client about that concerned his presence in Florida, okay? And only to that point, alright? Yes, sir. Mr. Blancha, did my client indicate the names of all the individuals that he was in Florida with at that time? Yes, sir, he did. Will you please tell the jury the names of the individuals who were also present in Florida besides him? Mark Walter, Lisa Dunn, and Tom Cantrell. Did Mr. Remetta convey to you or relate to you the type of transportation that Mr. Cantrell was driving? Yes, Mr. Remetta advised me Cantrell was driving an older model brown Pontiac passenger car. Thank you, Mr. Blancha. No further questions, Your Honor. Mr. Fooch. Did Mr. Remetta ever change his story regarding this Tom Cantrell? Yes, eventually it was changed. Yes, sir. And he in fact admitted that there was no such individual by the name of Tom Cantrell? Yes, sir, that was told to us later. As a matter of fact, he admitted to you that the only people that were ever with him on this trip from Michigan to Florida were who? Mark Walter and Lisa Dunn. And of course, Daniel Remetta. Yes, sir. So as far as you know, Tom Cantrell didn't exist, did he? Well, we found out through other investigations that there was a Tom Cantrell. Okay, but Mr. Remetta had indicated to you that he was not, in fact, with him at any time on this trip. Is that not correct, sir? Yes, sir, I believe that's correct. At a later date. So he told you a name and then recanted that, did he not? Yes, sir. Alright, nothing further. Mr. Springstead. Mr. Blancha. Yes, sir. Mr. Fooch indicated my client recanted that there was another individual. In fact, my client simply said the name was incorrect, didn't he? That may have been correct. I am not aware of the other name that he used. But they did say that a Tom Cantrell was a fictitious name. So that individual existed, but the name was not correct. I am not sure if there was an individual, he just said that the name was fictitious. But he did tell you that there was an individual named Tom Cantrell driving a brown Pontiac in Ocala, right? In Florida, right? Yes, sir. During that interview, he did. And that interview was conducted on February the 16th? Yes, sir. That is correct. Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor. The court. You may step down. Mr. Springstead. Approach the bench, Your Honor. The court. Yes. Whereupon the counsel for the respective parties to cause approached the bench. Mr. Springstead. We are waiting on our witnesses from Orlando, Judge. They are in transit. They should have been here by 2. They are coming. They're going to have them here at the courthouse and I can put them on in 5 minutes. I just need to be telling them what they are going to be doing. They may have to change clothes. Miss Jenkins, can we take a recess until 2:30? Can we do that? The court. How many witnesses will you have? Mr. Springstead. 3. The court. When Florida investigators asked Danny what route they took after leaving the state, Danny, referring to I-75, responded, "That one that goes into Georgia." And when Danny was asked if they took another major highway, possibly Highway 10, that crosses east to west into Alabama, Danny responded, "Whatever state is after Florida." "All the way to Montgomery?" the investigator asked. "All the way to Montgomery," answered Danny. February 8, 1985. In Alabama, the gang had planned on pulling some armed robberies, but changed their minds, because most of the store owners had firearms of some kind behind their counters. Instead, they stopped at a rest area, where Lisa sold a cherished ring she had received for her 16th birthday and a necklace for only $10 quick cash. If the gang had, in fact, met Mr. Johnny Williamson at a gay bar called the Honey for the Bear in downtown Montgomery, it would have been on this day. But how or why a jailhouse snitch claimed in an affidavit to have met Tom Cantrell remains a mystery. The gang, wanting to stick to smaller roads, was stopped on Highway 50 just west of Montgomery at around 6 p.m. by the Alabama State Police, at which time Mark got a warning ticket for having a headlight out. Mark had wanted to shoot the trooper, but Danny, in the front seat, had quickly taken the gun away from Mark and hid it under the seat. They crossed the state line into Mississippi, Lisa behind the wheel, as the other two had been awake since leaving Florida. Stopping at a rest area just west of Vicksburg, they tried to sell a spare tire for gas money, but some guy just gave them $5 without taking the tire. Mark then took the wheel, drove back to Vicksburg to a truck stop where he got gas, and then looped around back west, crossing the Mississippi River and entering the state of Louisiana. February 9th, Lisa awoke in the backseat at dawn to see Mark and Danny talking to some black guy outside of the car. They were parked high on a hill in what looked like a salvage yard a few miles outside of Dixie Inn, Louisiana. Beside a rundown trailer, the only home on the property, sat a fancy car that belonged to the 5'5", 180-pound, 50-year-old black man named Duke McGee, who dealt in stolen goods and who was paying Danny $25 cash for Mark's sawed-off 20-gauge shotgun. Leaving the salvage yard, the Cutlass rolled down the hill about a mile across a set of railroad tracks, and another 2 miles on a blacktop road to a bridge under construction. There they got back on Highway 47 near the small town of Midland and headed west towards Shreveport. In Shreveport, they cruised around looking for an easy target to rob, but settled on stealing spare tires from the backs of a few trucks parked on the street. That night, the gang stopped at a gas station and sold one of the spare tires that they had stolen for $20. Meanwhile, Danny had talked to the gang about some deal he had made with the black guy back at the salvage yard, and that he wanted them to go back and stay with the man, but instead, they stayed the night at a rest area somewhere between Dixie Inn and Shreveport. February 10th. The following morning, midway between Shreveport and the Texas border, they got off the expressway, and about 2 miles past the gas station, a large black and yellow sign with a graphic of a fat hog holding a revolver in each 5-fingered hand, each barrel pointing directly at the viewer, read, "Ham and Guns," with an arrow pointing down a dead-end road. The gang approached the flea market to see a conglomerate of old train cars spilling out with antiques, comic books, movie memorabilia, clothes, toys, furniture, fishing gear, and walls and fences lined with decorative signs that warned, "No trespassing. Violators will be shot. Survivors will be shot again. There's nothing here worth dying for. If you're found here tonight, you will be found here tomorrow. And due to the price increase of ammo, do not expect a warning shot." The Greenwood Flea Market remains the largest bazaar in the Ar-La-Tex tri-state area, in the center of the chaotic mix of tricycles, gas cans, tin buckets, and tackle boxes, milk crates, waiter boots, bird feeders, and lawn ornaments. The Big Top, a long wooden frame building that charges a 50-cent donation for each patron to enter, which went toward handicapped children. The gang of 3 passed endless stalls displaying ham radios and new and used firearms, the main spectacle, and Danny stopped at a table selling brand new guns, where he found another blue-steeled .357 snub-nose revolver, and the vendor told Danny the price was $350 plus the proper paperwork. Broke and without ID, Danny walked away, and at a stand directly across the aisle, where a man was selling used guns, Danny had found Mark holding a .22 caliber semi-automatic Ruger handgun aimed in firing position across the market. The man, named Bryce Lightfoot, was around 60 years old, white, 6'2", and balding. He could tell Mark badly wanted the gun and began to talk Mark's ear off, telling him that no paperwork was necessary. He'd take care of it, Lightfoot assured him. $130 cash, and it's yours to walk away with and do as you please. After all, it was none of Lightfoot's business. His business was strictly cash, guns, and cash. But Mark was flat broke as well. However, this had never stopped him before, and immediately he began to plot his next robbery to raise the cash. So the gang piled back into the Oldsmobile and headed directly for the Texas state line. According to Lisa Dunn and Danny Remetta, in the Marshall, Texas area, they stopped at a convenience store where Mark and Danny entered with the 357, and Mark pointed it at a female clerk. Danny grabbed her and forced her out of the store because Mark had suggested the idea that they take her with them and let her out down the road. Mark drove to a wooded area and told the girl to get out. He told her to start running, and Mark followed her into the woods. Meanwhile, back in the car, Danny and Lisa could hear screaming, followed by a series of gunshots. Mark returned to the car, started eating a candy bar that he had stolen from the store, and made the statement, "I killed her." After the shooting, the gang headed back east, back for the flea market in Shreveport, where Lightfoot kept his word and handed over the .22 Ruger for $135 cash. No paperwork required. "I'll take care of it, young man," he said, and threw in a free holster. And Mark stuck his new trophy gun in the waistband of his pants. The next step was to find ammunition for the new gun, and some for Lisa's father's 357 while they were at it. In a little town called Homer, just outside of Dixie Inn, Danny spotted a wino hanging out in front of a liquor store. Where else? And he offered to throw the man some cash for a bottle of wine if he'd buy them some ammo. C and Danny didn't have any ID. First, the wino went into a hardware store on one side of the street and purchased some .22 caliber shells. Then he crossed a one-way street to a fishing tackle type store where he bought .38 caliber bullets that would also work in the 357 Magnum. Danny paid the man his $10 and then went into the same hardware store and bought 2 cans of red spray paint. Back in the car, Mark loaded his .22 with ammo, sure to keep the chamber empty under the firing pin before sticking the gun back into his waistband in case it might accidentally go off. The gang then returned to the junkyard on the hill, 12 miles outside of Dixie Inn, to visit their new pal, Duke, where they would paint the back half of the car red before running out of paint. Danny offered to help, but Mark insisted his car was just too lovely for Danny to touch. The result? A strange conglomerate of colors, making the car look like it had been pieced together at a junkyard from various parts of old broken down Oldsmobiles. Indeed, more likely to catch a trooper's eye than the original design. The gang hung out for a while and changed a few tires on some stolen cars for Duke, who had indeed ran a fence at the salvage yard. He paid them $25 for the work and bid them good luck on their precarious travels. It had been a long day, and the gang was utterly exhausted from adrenal fatigue, massive amounts of alcohol consumption, and in Danny's case, the wearing off of handfuls of no-dose caffeine pills that he had purchased at truck stops along the way. They stopped at a Holiday Inn near Bossier City, but the rooms were too expensive. So they crossed under the interstate where they found a cheaper Motel 6 full of semis, and Mark registered in his own name. The room was run down with no tub and only a dirty shower, but the three slept soundly throughout the night. February 11th. Upon waking up the following day in the motel, the TV was flipped on to the news. It was a story about a robbery in Texas, and before the gang's now wide-open eyes centered around the screen at the end of the bed, the story stated that 3 subjects in a blue car had robbed a gas station, kidnapped a female clerk, and taken her to a wooded area where she was shot multiple times, adding a miraculous and nightmarish description of the victim. Eyewitness survives. "Let's get the hell out of here," said Mark, and in a matter of minutes, Danny, Lisa, and Mark fled north on Highway 7 for the Arkansas state line. Interior courtroom. Mr. Fooch. "Good morning. Would you state your name for me, please, ma'am?" "Camilla Yvonne Carroll." "And where do you live?" "Legion Fields, Texas." "Excuse me, ma'am, you need to speak up so the court reporter can take down everything that you say. If you want, I'll adjust this microphone, if it won't intimidate you." "Alright. How about that? Can you live with that?" "Uh-huh." "Do you mind if I call you Camilla?" "No, go right ahead." "Camilla, let me direct your attention to the 10th day of February 1985 and ask you what you were doing on that particular day. What your occupation was." "I was a cashier at a mobile station." "Is that a gasoline station?" "Yes, sir." "And where is that located?" "In Wascom, Texas." "And where on Wascom, Texas was it located near?" "It's right on Interstate 20. "Approximately how far off Interstate 20 is it located?" "It's just right off of Interstate 20. "So you exit from Interstate 20 and..." "Yes, you just pull right into the station." "Okay, so you pull into the station. What type of things did you sell out of the station there?" Groceries, cigarettes, and gas." "Did you sell any beer there?" "No." "Why not?" "It was a dry county." Okay, can you describe the station for me, how it appears, whether or not there are glass windows, things of that nature? It's open, kind of open. It's just glass. It's just glass windows all in the front and along the side. So then a person pulling up in there could look inside and see how many clerks were on duty. Yes, sir. Anything unusual happened that day? Yes, sir. There was 2 guys that came in, and one pulled a gun out and the other removed the money from the cash register, and then, excuse me, ma'am, I would like you to look around the courtroom and tell me whether or not you see anybody that you recognize. Yes, sir. He's sitting right over there. Could you point him out to me, please? That man right there. What kind of clothing does he have on? A black suit. Your Honor, may the record reflect she's identified the defendant. The court. So noted. Mr. Fooch, did you see this gentleman on the 10th of February? I sure did. What did you observe him do, if anything? He was the one that pulled the gun out on me, and then they removed me from the premises and took me to a wooded area, and he shot me 5 times. Let me show you what has been admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit number 37. Let me ask you if this looks like the gun that was used. Yes, sir, it does. And you saw who carrying this gun on the 10th of February? That man right over there? Now, what time of day was this, Miss Carroll? It happened about 4:18 in the afternoon? Yes, sir. And the defendant and the other individual came in the station, is that correct? Yes, sir. Can you describe this other man for me? He was fairly young, and he had blondish brown hair and a very lot of pimples on his face. I want to show you what has been labeled on the back of Exhibit 17 with the name Mark Anthony Walter on the back, and ask you to take a good look at it and tell me whether or not you recognize that photograph. Yes, sir, but being when they done it to me, he didn't have, he doesn't have the pimples on his face. When they done it, he did. But it's your testimony that this man was present when the defendant pulled a gun on you, is that correct? Yes, sir. Let me show you another portion of the State's Exhibit 34, labeled on the back Exhibit 18, with the name Lisa Jean Dunn on the photograph. Do you recognize that photograph? Yes, sir. Did you see Miss Dunn on that day? Only when they put me in the car, but she was present with the man depicted in this particular exhibit and the defendant on that day. Yes, sir. Let me show you another portion of the State's Exhibit 37, labeled on the back Exhibit 15. Photograph of an automobile. Do you recognize that car? Yes, sir, I do. What is that, if you know? It's a Malibu. Did you see the defendant in that particular vehicle on the 10th of February? Yes, sir, I did. Was this the automobile that they used when they pulled into the station and robbed you? It was a blue car, blue all over from what I remember. But this appears to be the same automobile. Uh-huh. Likewise, what appears in Exhibit 16? Yes, sir. Now, Miss Carroll, what was taken in the robbery that occurred in your station on the 10th of February? The money out of the cash register and 2 cartons of cigarettes. 2 cartons of cigarettes. Uh-huh. Your witness. Mr. Springstead. Thank you. Good morning, Miss Carroll. How are you today? Fine. Miss Carroll, I believe you indicated that the incident that occurred to you on the 10th of February occurred in the afternoon at approximately 4:18. Is that correct? Yes, sir. That was during the hours of daylight. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And I believe you also indicated that you were actually physically removed from the station? Yes, sir, I was. Now, the people that robbed you took you out of the station? Yes, sir. And asked you to get in the car and travel with them a distance. Is that correct? Yes, sir, they did. And in fact, you were then let out of the car and told to walk out through the woods? Yes, I was. Then you were shot at that point? Yes, sir. You were not shot in the head at all? No, sir, I wasn't. Your wounds were sustained to the body? Yes, sir. Now, after you were shot, you fell down on the ground? Yes. And you laid there? And the people did not come back over to you and you were not shot anymore? No, sir. And no one then attempted to shoot you in the head? No, sir, they didn't. Did these people pump any gasoline when they came in your station? No, sir, they didn't. They did not pump any gasoline. You were in no way injured or shot on the premises of the station? No, sir. Miss Carroll, who took the carton of cigarettes? Remetta did. How long did this incident last? Approximately about... Miss, from the time they came into the store until you were shot? I'd say about 20 minutes. No further questions. Mr. Fooch. Carroll, were you the only clerk on duty? Yes, sir, I was. Can you describe the immediate vicinity of the station there? Whether or not there were other persons, for example, that might have heard the gunshot? There were 2 houses that were behind the station, but there was a trailer park that was right down from where I was taken. And there were some people in that trailer park that heard the shots. Now, when you indicate that you were moved from the station to a location in the woods, where Mr. Remetta shot you 5 times, how far were you removed in distance? About 2 blocks, maybe 3. How many feet would that be approximately, feet or yards? Anywhere between 200 and 300 feet, I guess. And so you were moved from a location where there might have been people to a location, yes, sir, where it was more remote. Uh-huh. Alright, Miss Carroll. Now, where were you shot? I was shot from the waist down. And how many times were you shot? 5. Can you detail it for the court, the manner in which the shooting occurred? What the defendant said to you at the time he was shooting you, if anything? He didn't say nothing while he was shooting. Before he shoot me, he told me, he says, start running, for me to run, and when I got ready to run is when he started shooting. Did you in fact begin running? I was getting ready to. How close was he to you at the time when he first shot you? He was about as far from here as we are apart. Can you estimate that for me in feet? I would say about 20-25 feet. And he shot you one time. He shot me twice and then I fell to the ground. Stand up please for the court to locate where you were actually shot. I was shot twice in the back and then twice in one leg. Once in the other. And the last bullet went in my side here and came out over here. Now after the second shot when you fell on the ground, did you actually see Mr. Remetta shooting you? Yes, I did. What were you doing? I was just laying there. In what position? As females call it, the fetus position. Was your body curled up? My arms were curled. Were you playing dead? I sure was. And he shot you 3 more times. Yes, sir, he did. Alright, nothing further. Mr. Springstead. Miss Carroll, was there anyone else in the store during the time of this incident? No, sir, there wasn't. So there was no one else there? No, sir. And the injuries you sustained were after the money was taken from the cash register, and the things occurred in the store, is that correct? Yes, sir. No further questions, Your Honor. Mr. Fooch. Miss Carroll, again, I'm going to ask you that you speak up loudly enough so that the members of the jury can hear you. If you can slide your chair forward a little bit again, maybe we can help a little bit. Okay, Miss Carroll, let me again direct your attention to that afternoon. Specifically, tell me again what occurred at the station in detail. Yes, sir. Tell me again what happened. The 2 guys came in and one pulled a gun out and the other one removed the money from the cash register. Alright, now the man that pulled the gun out, did he say anything to you? He said move away from the register. Did you comply? I obeyed what he said. And what happened next? Then the other guy removed the money, and after they got it, the guy that had the gun said, was there any more money? And I said no. Then they removed me from the station. Now who opened the cash register again? The guy that was with the defendant. Not the man with the gun? No. Had they attempted to purchase any items prior to... Yes, they did. And what did they attempt to buy? They got a candy bar and a little piece of candy. Who specifically got these 2 items? The other guy that was with them. What did he do with them? He ate them. Did he eat them in the store? Uh-huh. In front of you? Yes, sir. Was this before or after the gun was pulled on you? This was before. Did anybody attempt to pay for those items? Yes, sir, he paid for them. What did he pay you with? What type of money? With some change. Did you open the register when he gave you the change? Yes, sir. Did you close it back? Yes. And then someone produced a gun and pointed at you and told you to move away from the register? Yes. Now, I want you to look around the courtroom and tell me whether or not you recognize the man that you testified pulled the gun on you that day. Yes, sir, I do. Again, would you point him out for me? Please. It's that man sitting with the black suit. And again, I ask you to take a look at this photograph of Mark Walter. And again, do you recognize this man? Yes, sir, I do. And who is that individual? That is the man that was with the defendant. And this man did not have a gun. No, sir. This is the man who had bought the candy bars. Yes. There's no question about that in your mind at all. No, sir. Which one were you watching? Both of them. They were standing side by side? No. One was in front of me and the other one was across the counter. But you were able to see both of them simultaneously. Yes, sir. Did they carry on a conversation? They were all whispering, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. So they were talking back and forth amongst themselves. Yes. Did the girl in the car do anything to give you the impression that she was a hostage also like yourself? No, sir. So she seemed like she was just one of the crew right there? Yes, sir. She was going along with everything they were doing? Yes. Did she do anything that made it seem like she was in fear of her life, in fear for herself? No, sir. You already identified this photograph. You identified this photograph as being the individual in the other individual in the car, is that correct? Yes, sir. But he didn't look like that when you saw him, did he? No, sir. He looked a lot more scraggly. He looked a lot more scraggly? Yes, sir. His face was very blemished. Pimples and zits. I called them zits. He didn't look anything like that in the photograph. No. Do you recall what he was wearing? He was wearing a burgundy jacket and blue jeans. Does that look like the clothes he was wearing the day he came in your store? Yes, it does. Now take a good look. Take a good, careful look at it. Does that look like the person that you saw in the store with my client? Yes, sir. Miss Carroll, the individual that was depicted in that photograph appears to be deceased. The fact that that person died, when did you become aware of that? When did you first learn that? It was after I got out of the hospital. Do you recall when? Not right offhand, I don't. Now, you identified my client in court today, but in fact, you have seen a photograph of him previously in these proceedings, haven't you? Yes, sir. The other individual in the car with my client, is that correct? In fact, that photograph has assisted you and allowed you identify him as the individual that shot you at these proceedings today, isn't that correct? Yes, sir. as opposed to the possibility that Mark Walter was the one that shot you. No, sir. In fact, were you ever shown a photograph of Mark Walter? I believe once I was. Okay, when? It was right after they caught him and Sheriff Martin from Harrison County. He brought the pictures and had me identify them. Are you saying there was a photograph of Mark Walter in those pictures? Yes, I think so, but I'm not sure. So you can't be sure if there was other people that came in your store. So you can't be sure. I am certain of it. You're certain that this photograph was in those photographs. I am certain that he came into my store. And you're certain that this photograph was contained in that same group of photos. No, I didn't say that. I said I was certain he came into the store. There might have been a photograph of him. Well, can you remember if he was there or not? Seems like you would be able to remember that. If it was a person that came into your store and was part of this incident that you have described, he was a part of the incident, and I know the man that shot me. I know the man that took the money out of the register. But wouldn't you recall seeing a picture of him if you had seen one? Yes, I would. Well, did you see one? Yes, I did. When? When you brought me the other pictures and had me identify them. So there was a picture of Mark Walter in there. Yes, that is your sworn testimony. Yes. Miss Carroll, have the photographs that you saw that you indicated had my client's picture in them as well as Mark Walter, would you be able to identify that again if you saw it? Yes, sir, I would. Can you describe it for me, what it looked like? It was black and white. Which one are you asking about? I'm asking about the one that had Mark Walter's photograph in it. The one you just told me that Deputy Martin showed you. The ones that Deputy Martin showed me, he said there was one I did not really have to look at because he was dead. But you did look at it because you said that his picture was there. Well, yeah. Now, what did those photographs look like? Can you describe them? No, they was all black and white and there was a lineup of men. How were they lined up? By numbers. Crossed like this or up and down? They went up and down. And did you write anything on or about these photographs that you identified as the people that you were involved with? Yes, sir, I did. You're sure about that? My signature is on every photo that I identified. So you identified Mark Walter? Yes, I did. You're sure about that? Yes, I am. You are as sure about that as you are sure about who shot you? Yes, I sure am. Miss Carroll, I hand you what has been previously marked as a defense exhibit number 5. Are these the photographs that you saw? Yes. And would you see which photograph was the one? Where is Mark Walter's photograph in there that you already testified you identified? It's not here. Well, you testified under oath that he was on there. You identified him. You wrote your name beside it. No, I told you there was other pictures that he showed me. You told me that you identified Mark Walter's picture along with my client's picture on the exhibits that were shown to you by Deputy Martin. Mr. Fooch. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is arguing with the witness. Mr. Springstead. Well, Your Honor, she's the court. Finish your question, Mr. Springstead. Mark Walter's picture is not on there, is it? No, it's not. Mr. Fooch. Argumentative. The court. Overrule the objection, Mr. Springstead. Thank you, Your Honor. So what you said to the jury about this picture being on there, and you identified it, is wrong. Well, Mr. Martin showed me some pictures of him. If they're not in there, it's not my fault. But you testified it was on this list. No, I said there was other pictures. Miss Carroll, did you testify that he showed you a lineup and that they were up and down? Yes, I did. And that Mr. Walter's picture was on that. No, I did not say that it was on that. I have no further questions for this witness. Mr. Fooch, can you please look at the right of the photograph under the date 2/22/85, the initials CC? There's some notes. What does that say? It says, the man that shot me. Who wrote that on there? I did. And who is this a photograph of? That man sitting right over yonder. Mr. Remetta? Yes, sir. Miss Carroll, when you were taken out of the vehicle by Mr. Remetta and told to move some distance away, did you and he have any conversation about a piece of paper on the ground? Yes, sir, we did. And what did he tell you about that? He said, when you get to that piece of paper, I'm going to tell you to run. And did he indicate a piece of paper on the ground? Yes, sir, it was a styrofoam plate. And how far away from you was it? It was right across the ditch. And when you got to that cup, what happened? It was a plate, but I got a little farther into the woods and he said, start running. And before I started running is when he started shooting. And after you were shot, you went to the hospital? Yes, sir. How did you get to the hospital? Well, I got up, and after they left, I walked to the interstate, and I flagged some people down that had seen me, and I had my arms out, and they stopped and took me to the hospital. Mr. Fooch, thank you very much. No further questions. Mr. Springstead, Miss Carroll, you were definitely shown this photograph of Mark Walter. A black and white photograph, is that correct? Yes, sir. But you don't know when you were shown that photograph? No, sir, I'm not sure. When was the last time you know for a fact you were shown that photograph? I don't remember. When? Earlier this morning? You don't remember when? Earlier this morning. So you saw this one this morning? Yes. Now, did you say that Deputy Martin showed you photographs of Mark Walter when he came to see you? I could be mistaken, but I think I remember. Let's don't make any mistakes, okay? The jury doesn't want to hear about what could be mistakes, Mr. Fooch. Your Honor, the jury doesn't want to hear counsel posturing either. If that's a question, let's phrase it as a question. Otherwise, I object to it. The court. Sustain the objection. Mr. Springstead. I beg your pardon, Mr. Fooch. Okay, let's try not to make any mistakes. If you could, Miss Carroll, okay? But everybody makes mistakes. So you admit that you made a mistake? Yes, I do. But it's your statement that you are not making any mistakes with regard to identifying my client as the person who shot you. That's right. But you will agree that you were made aware of the fact that the other person involved in the robbery was dead. Yes. So you knew that. Yes. So the only other person was my client that was alive. Yes. So the only person left alive to prosecute was my client. I'm Cory Zimmerman, and this is Spoon River Gothic, Season 2. Death Rides the Highway, a thrill ride fueled by murder and terror. Think, feel, and understand the world around you with Spoon River Gothic Podcast, because we go where the others don't. We dive deeper. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. It means more than you know in this cutthroat world. And until next time, keep a vigilant eye over your shoulder, because there's always more to the story.
Ever wonder how much of your personal data is out there on the internet for anyone to see? More than you think. Your name, contact info, social security number, home address, and even information about your family members is all being compiled by data brokers and sold to the highest bidders online. That means anyone on the web, criminal or investigator, can get your private details, which, as true crime enthusiasts know all too well, increases your risk of identity theft, phishing scams, harassment, stalking, and unwanted phone calls. As a podcast that exists publicly and shares our opinions online, we are hyper aware of safety and security, and all this data being so easily searchable on the internet can have real-life consequences. This is why Spoon River Gothic is proud to partner with Delete Me, the #1 service in online data removal. Delete Me finds and removes any information you don't want online and makes sure it stays off. Their dedicated team finds and removes your personal info from the largest people search databases and helps prevent potential ID theft, doxing, stalking, and phishing scams in the process. That's why I personally recommend Delete Me for protecting yourself and your personal information. Sign up at joindeleteme.com/spoonriver and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts will take it from there. As part of their subscription service, you will even receive personalized privacy reports showing what they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. Their experts are always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want accessible online. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal info off the web and making your personal profile no longer anyone's to sell. So join us at deleteme.com/spoonriver, because no one wants to be a victim nor a suspect. So get protected, and the next time a case hits too close to home, you won't find yourself asking the stranger on the other end of the phone, "How did you get my number?" Go to joindeleteme.com/spoonriver and get started today.
Death rides the highway.